board gamers, how's it going? It's Mike Hassey here, and I am back from the pitch meetings. And they were super cool pitch meetings. I hope you got to see some of them in the last episode. The guys had a ton of feedback. Lots of things they liked, some things they didn't like, lots of ideas, and a ton of great discussion. In short, a lot of stuff to unpack. So I'm now sitting here with my handy dandy sketchbook like I like to do, and I'm trying to put down all that information from the meetings down there, as well as some initial rough ideas and thoughts that I've got about the feedback and where those things might potentially lead us. So for now, I'm going to get this stuff down on my sketchbook, let it percolate a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll take a deeper dive into it. Okay, so I'm back with my sketchbook in hand, with all my ideas and thoughts jotted down in it, and I've also got some blank paper in front of me, and I'm ready to continue the work. So what am I going to continue? Well, I got to take a deeper dive into things, and I got to start to work out some of the mechanics for the two ideas that the guys liked from the pitch meetings, flesh those out so we have some very detailed game designs to look at further. And I'm going to start today with idea number one, the shifting Acropolis. This is an idea that in the pitch meetings, the guys really liked. In addition to that, I found out some interesting information in those pitch meetings that I think lends itself to this design, or possibly a version of this design. And that was, I found out when it comes to Weirdwood Manor itself, the actual entity, there's some lore mechanics in terms of how it works that I think could kind of make for a really interesting riff on the shifting Acropolis. Namely, when it comes to the world of the manor, that when it comes to moving between rooms in the manor, think of those as locations in terms of the game, that there's this thing called the meandering hallways. And it is this temporal mechanic where, as a character, when you enter a hallway and exit the hallway, depending on how much time you actually spend within that hallway, dictates where you end up. So it's not so much a physical go from A to B, it's about how much time you take to go from A to B. And I thought that was an interesting concept and maybe kind of dovetailed with some of the things that I was pitching in the shifting Acropolis, this idea that locations change based on time changing or some other game state changing. So that's kind of the riff I want to explore a little bit and see what I can do with that particular idea when it comes to dealing with it thematically for this game design idea. So with that said, I'm going to start working with those ideas in mind right now here in front of me, and we're just going to see where this takes us. So I have this notion that in the context, the players are in the manor this time, and that there's a central location in the manor from which the rooms in the manor and the corridors radiate out. And I still had this idea that you could have these sort of concentric rings on the board, like this, and that these can still hold kind of tiles that can vary from game to game, and that these tiles can represent different rooms in the manor. And then the question is, well, how do those pathways connect between room to room? And it's certainly possible that on a particular ring, we still might have hallway connections there, but I wanted to build in this idea of having a temporal component of the corridors changing where you go to and where you come from based on the time in the game. So then I had this idea that then you'd have the next ring here, and this next ring would essentially be the corridor that sits between another ring of rooms and the inner ring of rooms. So here's another ring of rooms, and here are the room tiles here, different rooms that you can visit in the manor, and then inside this, you've got this corridor. And I'm just going to sort of draw it with, hang on, I'm going to grab a pen. All right, let's just take a blue here. So let's say we've got these, we've got the corridor in between these rooms, and so the corridor is basically the thing that connects them. So imagine having the corridor that runs around all the way around, probably in a circle, and then off of that has like little branches that can feed back into these different rooms depending on the alignment, so that if the corridor lines up with the room, you can move into it. And so then the idea would be that you'd have another corridor here doing the same thing, and then maybe another outer ring with another set of rooms. And of course the geometry is something I've got to work out. This is super rough. And again, you've got this corridor, this outer corridor here that also goes all the way around, and it can make connections between rooms depending on the alignment of this ring. So this was kind of the genesis of the idea of basically having this corridor ring here and this corridor ring here be rotatable. So these can still shift. And one of the ideas I had was to have these shift based on the time. So got this concept that maybe the players have a set amount of time to complete their goal in the game. And that set amount of time, maybe let's just say for argument's sake, it's 12 hours. And so if they have 12 hours in the game, there'll be some mechanic where every time you take an action, maybe the clock moves forward 15 minutes or something like that. So we have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of actions potentially for the players to achieve their final goals. So the idea here is as that game time, so if it starts say at 12 p.m. and a player takes an action and now it's 12:15 p.m., that as that time changes in the game, that these particular corridor rings can shift. Again, coming back to the theme and the lore in the world where depending on the time you enter or leave a corridor in the manor, that will determine where you end up. So the time changes where you end up. So for example, this outer ring here might be based on, this one might be based on hours. And this inner ring here, maybe this is based on minutes, so that these will sort of rotate at a different frequency even. So 15 minutes, maybe 15 minutes means that this inner ring here has to shift so that now 15 minutes is, say, perhaps there's a marker that says this is the minutes and this is the current hours here. So we'd have to obviously have these printed on the rings. Here's 12 o'clock and here's 0 minutes and over here is 15 minutes. And so you're going to rotate that ring so that so it's now 12:15 matching game time. And then what happens, of course, is these little linkages to rooms now shift. Okay, hope everyone's with me. So this was kind of the temporal idea that I had for working this out, which I'm kind of excited about. There's all kinds of things to figure out. What's the geometry so you can kind of get between rooms? How does the time frame work and how much these shift versus the time in the game? Can the players affect that in other ways? Could they potentially move time backwards? There's all kinds of potential other questions. But as a core mechanic, I'm like, this sounds kind of cool. I kind of like this idea. Time shifting and the corridor shift. And it changes how you move around the board and how the players get to different areas. So that's cool. So when I thought about this particular design, this was something I kind of roughly sketched out, in my sketchbook here, looking at some notes, and something I was thinking about in the shower. And one of the challenges that occurred to me was in the original design that I pitched the guys, if you remember the shifting Bookropolis design, the Bookropolis rings were changing because the Fae was sort of messing with the Bookropolis. The more it spread, the more it tainted, the more unpredictable the Bookropolis came, and the more these shifts happened. And the players needed to work against the Fae to defeat them, but also to kind of lessen their influence and stop them from messing up the Bookropolis. So in this case here, this time and movement or shifting element is kind of just core to the mechanic. It's not something the players are trying to stop or work against. So then the question became, what are they trying to do in this context? So this is more thoughts in the shower here. So one of the things that happens in the Weirdwood universe in one of their forthcoming video games is that there's these little sort of creatures called scarabs. You think of like the scarab beetle, and I think they're like these little magical kind of like bugs that kind of infest things. So they infest the manor, and as they do that, they start to wreak havoc in the manor. They're not good, they're evil, nefarious little critters going through and doing all kinds of nasty things. So I thought, well, maybe they still will infest the manor, and maybe the players have to, as these little scarabs pour into rooms from somewhere, and I don't actually know exactly how a scarab looks, so I'm just going to draw it like that for now. As these little guys come into the rooms, the players have to fight against and repel these guys somehow. So that could be kind of cool. And then I sort of, an extension of the scarabs, I was like, well, battling the scarabs is kind of cool, but why are they coming in the manor? Where are they coming from? And then so I had this idea that these scarabs were kind of being controlled or run by some evil presence. And so the Order is an evil, kind of nefarious organization in Weirdwood, and maybe they're responsible for it, and maybe one of their lieutenants or something is actually in the manor coordinating all this. So maybe there's like some big nasty kind of 3D plastic mini that sits on the board here, and it's going to move around. The players have to battle it. So that's kind of cool too, potentially. But then what I started to think about was, okay, so if the players are going to move around from room to room, what kind of happens in the room? Why are they going to these rooms? And so I had this idea, let me see here. So I had this idea that different rooms could offer some kind of different benefits. But one thing I thought about is I thought, because the manor has all these different rooms and you can stumble on these rooms and not know what you're going to find or what's in there, I thought it'd be super cool to have a mechanic where the players have to go to the rooms to sort of see what's in the room. What are they going to find there? And I thought they could potentially find good or bad things. So starting with how do they find stuff, I had this idea that if you take one of these rings that hold the room tiles, and I'll blow it up here. So here's one of these things, and the idea is that you basically are going to put a tile here that represents a room. So, maybe it's got some shelves in it, and there's like a table, and there's chairs, or whatever that particular room is. And those tiles are actual physical sort of tiles that you can go and place down over top so that there can be variability from game to game. And so then I thought, well, okay, so how do you find something in the room? And I'd thought about this idea that if this is the room printed here, could you flip the room over and on the other side, the underside of the room, find something there, some cool thing. I thought that's kind of cool, but then part of the problem there is you flip that tile, and what, do you flip it back again now? And you can to go back and see the room view. And so what then I then thought about is the nature of this board to have these rings be rotatable is you're going to have a baseboard that everything sits on. I'm looking at this kind of in a section view, so cutting through the board. And then you're going to have these like kind of ring sections that basically go like this, and then here's the center piece of the board and the other little ring sections here. And these are cardboard, and so you've got like the ring ones that are going to basically rotate back and forth, and you've got these other ones. So there's the chance, the opportunity to have these room rings get cut out here so that you can place a tile and slot it in. And so the idea here was, instead of having the room flip, is that when you load these up, you could have a bunch of tiles that sit slotted in underneath the room. So here's the room tile, and then there's another tile underneath that sits basically underneath that. And these room tiles are basically, one side is just basically some sort of graphic or nothing, or just a flat color, but the underside of these is the thing that would show you what you find. And so if a player goes to a room, they get to take this room tile and they can just basically pick it up and move it aside, and what's underneath it, they can flip that and they can see what's there. And then after they've seen what's there, it might be that you get rid of that tile because you've found the thing and there's nothing else to find. That room's been basically explored. And what happens now is you don't have a tile underneath the room, and the room slots back in, so it's flush here with this ring, and now you can just physically see what rooms, you can know which rooms have been explored and which are not, because they're either flush or they're up and they've got another explorable tile underneath. So then I thought, okay, I've got this mechanic where I can find stuff. So what could they find? So coming back to the little scarabs, like, well, where do the scarabs come from? Where are they in the manor? And I thought, well, maybe when you set up the game, that some of these room tiles here are already like tainted by the scarabs. Like it could be like a tear in the fey where they're pouring through, and so there's some kind of graphic on here with a tear in the fey, and that these are where scarabs are starting to spawn. And you could have these happen in multiple spots on the board. You could even add more or less of these spots depending on how hard or easy you wanted the game to be, potentially. So you start where you see where these scarabs are coming in. And so the players know where the scarabs are coming in. There's some kind of mechanic that's going to maybe make them every turn, more of them spawn from these locations, and they slowly start to spread into other rooms and wreak havoc, and that's a bad thing. The players want to stop that. At the same time, when I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about having some big evil mini as part of this, I was like, okay, so where's the evil mini? And I thought what might be cool is the players know where scarabs are starting to spill into the manor, but maybe they don't know where the evil mini guy is, and they've got to locate him in order to defeat him. And it could be, coming back to this mechanic where these rooms have something you discover underneath, it could be for the scarab tiles or the scarab rooms, let's say you set it up and let's say there are 4 of these little spaces where the scarabs come into the board. You could then potentially take, for face down tiles, take 4 face down tiles, and where at the backs of them you can't see what they are, and on the undersides one of these 4 could represent the big evil baddie. So one of these 4 tiles is where the big evil baddie is, and you take these 4 tiles and you shuffle them up all face down, and then you put them down face down so that at the game state start, the players know that that evil baddie is going to be at one of these Fey Tear locations, which thematically makes sense. That's where he's kind of entered the manor along with scarabs, but they don't know which one. So the players are going to have to basically go and search these areas to find him. And once they found him, I'm thinking that once they found them, that we're going to move into a phase of the game where they got to defeat him while also making certain these little scarabs don't infect too much of the manor. And maybe it'll be that they slowly move into, these scarab guys slowly move towards the center or the heart of the manor. And if any of them get to the heart of the manor, maybe the players lose the game. So they're trying to stop that from happening, while to win the game, they got to find the big evil baddie and essentially defeat him. And in terms of finding him, you could say, well, maybe they never explore these scarab locations, so he never comes out. But if we come back to the clock idea, every action moves the clock along in the game state, and there could just be a lose condition where if too much time passes, the players lose the game. They have to basically find and defeat him in 12 hours or however much that might be. So they do want to go out there, they want to find him as soon as possible. And once they've located him on one of these little scarab tiles, maybe we've got this cool little 3D mini and he gets popped into that location, and now he's sitting here on the game board, and we might have some basic kind of AI routine where maybe he's going to move around the board and do stuff as well. And once he's discovered, now the players basically have to defeat him. I haven't gotten much farther than that. I don't know how they're going to defeat him right now, but probably, given we've got this mechanic of exploring room tiles and getting hopefully cool stuff, I'm thinking maybe it could be about, they go to these room tiles. What would be cool thematically actually is when they go to some of these room tiles, that they discover like another character in the manor, and it could be a character that helps them. So you go to room tile and you reveal this, and what you reveal is some kind of helpful character. And maybe they can recruit that character as part of the team to help battle the Fey creature. So they could offer some kind of power or something. I love the idea of like a final battle with dice or something like that. I mean, I love rolling dice. A lot of people do. It might be cool that as you recruit different characters, they come with different kinds of dice potentially, that somehow are thematically tied to a final battle or something like that. It could be when you go to these different locations that the players accrue other resources that I think I've maybe mentioned in some of the game ideas. So Min is magic in the game. That could be useful for powering attacks or something, or doing other special powers. Books or knowledge. If you recall, I had a couple game ideas where books and knowledge were being used to figure out things about a Fey creature that you're going to potentially battle. So we could potentially tie that back into the idea that you find books and knowledge, and those things give you an advantage when you go and battle this Fey creature. And then maybe there's other potential resources or other special actions. So we've got that resource, and maybe there's just actions, special actions in certain rooms, and those actions, maybe they require Min. So maybe there's this idea of wanting to accrue this resource to use it to power actions or power other spells or things to battle the creature. Okay, so that seems like a potential direction here. I'm liking the fact that you've got the game board changing in terms of how you get from room to room as the game plays, and it's tied to this time mechanic, so there is a bit of predictability for the players. They can know that when I take an action, the clock moves and the corresponding ring is going to shift. So would be the ability for the players to predict that. There's still the question of whether we might let them alter that in more meaningful ways. Like, this idea of recruiting characters. Maybe some characters give you dice for the battle, but maybe some characters here have some kind of special ability that you can trigger that plays with the time element in the game. So that's another possibility. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about that as a start. I've got some more detail down on the paper about how the board's going to work and some other things, but obviously still a lot of questions to be answered, a lot of things to flesh out. So I'm going to come back in the next episode and continue to do some work on some of the details about these game design ideas. So as always, if you like what we're trying to do here, like, subscribe, questions, comments, you know the routine. So until next time, board gamers, keep gaming.